with whose bounty I was so intimately familiar with when I was a child. Striped bass, crabs, they were gone, or they were prohibitively expensive. Crabs were just decimated. Rockfish, striped bass, they were commercially extinct. There was a moratorium on them. And by the way, when I say gone, I don't mean just magically disappeared. I mean we ate them. You know, and that's something to understand, is that we're all complicit, each and every one of us in this room, with the destruction that's been wrought upon the oceans. My career as a chef started because I was fluent in food. My family cooked dinner together 363 nights a year, and so it was a very important part of my upbringing. And when I found that the traditional path of education really wasn't a good fit for me at the time, I realized that this fluency in food offered me the structure, support mechanisms, and income, frankly, that I needed so desperately at that time, and that I really used food to create a series of relationships that became almost more important than the ingredients themselves that I was using. And I realized that chefs really have a power to extend relationships throughout the entire supply chain, and that ability really led me to pursue sustainable seafood, particularly because seafood is just a passion of mine to cook with. But it also afforded the opportunity to really use my skills as a chef to bring about a larger message and a larger change, and also an entertainment to my guests. My understanding of seafood, seeing my favorite species unavailable, really led me to believe and understand that the guiding hand of natural selection in this world has really become that of the consumer. And that, in fact, is led by the hand of a chef. Chefs have the power to destroy. It's me, my colleagues, who took slimehead and turned it into something heretofore unknown, now called orange roughy, popular staple on menus across the world. It's my brethren who put Chilean sea bass, formerly known as Patagonian toothfish, on menus across the globe. It is we who currently, right now, are purposely extirpating bluefin tuna. But what I realize is that if chefs have the power to destroy, we have the power to make people and the earth sick by the foods that we are serving. Therefore, it also stands to reason that we have the power to restore. If we can drive tastes, preferences towards destruction, therefore we can drive them in the opposite direction. And it's this belief that's really led me out of kitchens, to trade in my passion for food and hospitality, to pursue my passions in conservation. Through dinner, we really seek to feed a very complicated hunger. Through dinner, we seek jobs, we seek nutrition, we seek community, communion, we seek health for ourselves. We seek to nourish with a lot more than just calories. But unfortunately, food has been reduced to factory farms. Factory farms have been reduced to tons of crop to nutrition. Nutrition itself has been reduced into elements and minerals. And in doing so, in this reductive process, this mechanization, we've removed all of this human aspect of food. And in doing so, we've actually removed all that's valuable about food to humans.
We have local triggerfish, provided by Welcome Fish, with a cranberry crust. We have our kale salad, which is inspired by the cod and country. We do a kale salad every day at the cafe.
A lot of the most unsustainable seafoods are unsustainable because they're in high demand. And so their rarity has been driven up, and therefore their price as well. But sustainable seafood in particular does not fall victim to a lot of the sort of lack of efficiency that so-called sustainable agriculture kind of suffers from in terms of market understanding and market price and valuation. Sustainable seafood comes out of the ocean just as unsustainable seafood does. It enters the same processing facilities, it goes to the same counters, it enters the same cans and is sold in the same aisles as its unsustainable counterparts.
And oftentimes the more sustainable options are in fact cheaper because, well, they're still sustainable because people haven't wanted them traditionally, or our preferences have changed.
Sustainability really is an opportunity, but so is dinner. You know, the problem that faces our oceans right now are dire, and frankly, we've eaten our way into this crisis. But if we've eaten our way into it, then we can eat our way out. It requires us to kind of shift the dialogue away from this word sustainable. And I think that's really a big problem with where we are as an environmental industry. So we've largely had one word to describe everything that's happened in the past 40 years. Well, two words, sustainable and unsustainable. That word sucks. It's the worst term in the world. It relies on fear and guilt in order to maintain, really, the status quo. It's limited. It reduces natural systems into a strictly binary code of black or white, good or bad. And as most of you know, nature is never governed by such an archaic law. There's always nuance. It's in the case of all reality, there is bad and good. And reality exists somewhere in between. And so we need to find a way as an industry to begin to speak to those principles. You know, sustainability as a social idea, I think it is greatly flawed to really begin a dialogue about restorative seafood. And the purpose here is to begin to restore fish populations to their original bounty, to their natural bounty, even as we continue to take from them. We need to restore fisheries and fishing communities to the prudence, profitability, and pride that once made them a hallmark of American culture. We need to restore the habitat upon which all of the species that we derive from the ocean are based. We also need to reestablish and restore our faith in aquaculture so that it can move forward at the speed and at the will of capitalism to advance new technologies. But we also need to really begin to restore our expectations of what we deserve from our planet. I really believe that this planet can provide for our needs, even the needs of the coming 9 billion. But this planet will never keep pace with the desires of even a few billion. And that's a very different story to begin to tell. But fortunately, this is, for me, where it all comes back to the dinner table. It's easy. We can start tonight. We can all eat smaller portions of more diversified protein. We can rely on a great many more species to derive that protein from. We can eat a lot more vegetables. Duh. We want to save the oceans. That's it. Smaller portions, lots more vegetables. By the way, you want to save yourself too? And some money? And create some jobs? Wow. It's all the same answer.
Aquaculture is an absolutely fundamental and necessary part of our future, and in fact it's an absolutely fundamental and necessary part of our present. Aquaculture accounts for more than 50% of the seafood that we eat on this planet, and is both a vital economic as well as an environmental concern. Aquaculture, like all things in the world, represents both good and bad. In reality, as usually happens, exists in the infinitum in between. And so does aquaculture. There are some things like farm-raised salmon and branched bluefin tuna, some of whose practitioners are just doing it absolutely the worst way possible. That it just shouldn't really exist in that format. There are other producers who are doing things very much on the other side of the scale. Wholesale, the industry of farmed bivalves, mussels, clams, and oysters. I think it's our patriotic duty to eat as many of them as we can. In fact, it's the closest thing that we have to a perfect food, both agriculturally, aquaculture, or even wild.
And really, for far too long, we've relegated the sustainability or even the restorative dialogue to a very product-centric conversation. This salmon from Alaska wild caught by native tribesmen, this is sustainable. This salmon farmed in Chile by these methods is not sustainable. This grass-fed beefsteak is. This corn-fed beef isn't. Solar energy is sustainable. Fossil fuel energy is not. And so we've created these systems, black and white, yes or no, that we've gotten so stuck on that we've forgotten to have the behavioral aspect of sustainability that must absolutely accompany the empirical. To me, the compelling narrative of conservation is really a story of responsible consumption. It's not about what we don't do. It's not about what we abstain from. Rather, it's what we do. It's how we do it. It's why we eat it and who we support. So I think it's time to combine the emotional and the empirical. And I think that's something that you all have the power and capacity to do in order to give consumers a little bit of context for the decisions that we make each and every day, multiple times a day. And it really begins to allow us to restore our place in the systems of this world. Dinner is really a full contact relationship with our natural world. It is the celebratory and most intimate act of communion with each other and with the natural world. Some words to remember, please, which is to eat with care and be mindful of the environmental impacts of our choices. To eat with joy, that we may continue to partake and participate in the bounty of this natural world. And to eat together, to remind us of what truly unites all of us on this beautiful blue planet.